Killer, man. Well, hey, today we are special guest, cool guy, gentleman that I met. I don't know. It's been a while, actually. I don't
It
remember
has.
when we met, honestly, but it was pretty cool, and we had a good time. And so we have Alexander Amir on from Blitzalytics, also the NFL. Was not working at the NFL when we originally met, so I think I would have probably enjoyed that. No, I'm kidding. You're a great guy still. Yeah, man. I mean, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. Excited to talk about Blitzalytics, obviously. Very excited to talk about your position at the NFL and what you got rocking there. You mentioned law school before, so excited about that. But the first question I always got to ask is, where does your love of sports come from?
Yeah, for sure. I'm really happy to be here, first of all, for all the listeners out there.
All
Thank you
of
for
them.
taking the time to listen.
All of them.
Yeah. Yeah, so the interest in sports, I mean, I think like most people, so many people in our positions were sports fans since they were kids, just grew up watching the sport since I was 5, 6 years old. The earliest Super Bowl I can remember was when I was 6 or 7. So I've been a huge football fan primarily for my entire life. I think my love of football and my love of sports in general is just the camaraderie that's involved, the strategy that's involved with, you know, it's so complex, everything that goes into it. From any sport, basketball, baseball, hockey, but I really think football embodies that more than anything. There's so many moving parts. You know, all 11 guys have to be working in conjunction for a single football play to be successful, much less an entire game. So I really think that's where the love of football specifically comes from. And then as I got older, I started paying more attention to the actual business of football, all the issues going on. Early 2010s, there was the concussion lawsuit by Ray Easterling against the NFL, and that was settled in 11 or 12. Mid 2010s, around 2014, 2015, was a kind of an uptick in the domestic violence issues, a lot of DUIs off the field. And then now with the collective bargaining agreement coming up, a lot of it is about labor talks, guaranteed money, all that. So I think just being aware of all the issues that the NFL faces kind of goes through different kinds of phases. And the dream is basically to just be able to contribute to the sport in some way and hopefully, help it thrive.
That's a pretty awesome dream, man. I mean, right?
Yeah.
Like, what else? Well, like, the coolest thing that I get to do every day is I get to talk to people like you. I get to talk to people in all different shapes and sizes. I was actually lucky enough to have a conversation with Evan Spencer from the 2014 National Championship Ohio State Buckeyes, and got to talk to him
Oh,
about his career and what he's doing now. And it's just incredible. Like, sports for me, I mean, there's always like, it's the only thing I care about, really, as sad as that might sound. But there is literally nothing more than I love than the combination of the Mets, the Giants, and randomly Duke basketball. So
there you go. I'm
you
with
know,
you on
it's,
one of those three.
yeah,
So
okay, I'll take which one.
the Giants.
Okay, cool. I'll take that. But yeah, I see. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I just saw a Jets thing like right behind where you're sitting right now.
Yeah, my dad's a big Jets fan.
Okay, cool.
I'm at home right now. He's a huge Jets fan, but
All
I'm
right, all
Giants
right.
all the way.
Good. Yeah, very sad day tomorrow, I guess, actually, with Eli retiring. But it's more of a celebration, I think, and that's the way we got to look at it, right?
I think so too. I might shed a couple tears, but I think so too.
I think so. I think a buddy of mine was texting me earlier today, and he was like, "Yeah, man, I'm reading all this stuff, all these players are putting out. I'm like choking up at work here." I was like, "I'm not sad yet, but I'm gonna watch it tomorrow. I'm gonna watch the press conference, and I feel like I'll shed a real nice tear, like a
Yeah.
solid like one like." Perfect streamer, glistens in the sun kind of thing. So very excited about that. But you bring up football, and I really like what you're doing at Blitzalytics. But I do want to just point something out that you said. With all other sports, it is not nearly, I mean, they're all team oriented, right? But there's nothing, as you said, like football. 11 guys have to be doing the correct thing at the right time to make sure that a play works. Not just a game, right? And there's baseball, it's pitcher versus hitter. There's three people involved in 80% of a baseball game, and then once the ball gets hit, something happens. Basketball, we see it all the time. I mean, fast break, take that out, but you can see Steph Curry pretty much just do what he wants and then shoots a ball. Like, yeah, people are involved, but it's not the same thing. In football, you have the offensive line, you have the wide receivers, the running back, the quarterback. I guess it's just such a very interesting sport from that aspect that everything has to happen correctly at the same time. It's not quite like other sports. What exactly, like, with your love of football, at what point did you decide, like, hey, not only do I want to just watch this and consume this, as you said, you started to pay attention to the business around it, what's happening? Like, at what point were you like, hey, this is actually something that I want to just consume my life on from all fronts and all sides?
Yeah, so it kind of happened in two phases. I was playing on a youth football team, and this is like a league where parents are coaching. And every year there's a draft where the parents usually go to him. I asked my dad if I could go with him to our little youth league draft. And so I went, I drafted the team, and I like absolutely fell in love with the concept of being able to draft my own team. And so from that point on, I'm like, I'm going to be a general manager in the NFL. Like, I want the responsibility of doing that at the NFL level. So that's where that initial dream started of working in like football management or sports management in general.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, like I'd happily take a job in any sport. I love sports in general, but I just use football. That was the original dream. And I think what made me most aware of everything going on was in about 2014. I think it was the summer of 2014. I had broken a bone in my hip like
Ooh.
in June, like to start off the summer. Yeah, it was not great. And you don't like being on the couch in high school, missing the entire summer when you could be out playing basketball with your friends or whatever. And so I just watched a ridiculous amount of ESPN, and I kept noticing how many reports were of DUIs and domestic abuse issues, and so many just crimes across the board. And it seemed like a disproportionate number in that summer. And so that kind of got me thinking. I was applying to college a year later, and I wrote my college essay on how there has to be a greater emphasis on character evaluation in the NFL draft and recruiting players in general to avoid these things, because it's bad for the players and for the teams. Because I think the Cowboys had a few instances where they just acquired a bunch of defensive linemen. Greg Hardy is the biggest name that came to my mind, and they just never saw the field because they were involved in so many on-field
Mm-hmm.
issues. So that was definitely the incident that sparked me paying attention to things outside of just what's happening on the field in the game itself and the business itself.
And you make a really good point. Like, character issues in football, they do seem to happen more often. You would also attribute that to being a 53-man roster compared
Right.
to 25 or 26, whatever it is in baseball now, 12 in basketball. And I'll be honest, I don't actually know how many in hockey. I think it's 20 something, but I'm not totally sure about that one. So, you could attribute it to that, but also, obviously, head injuries and just the violence of the sport.
Right.
It's going to happen, right? And you make a good point that the NFL doesn't need these guys, right? Like, if Odell Beckham Jr. wasn't here, the NFL is going to keep chugging. Like, it's the shield. It literally doesn't matter who's playing. I'm going to watch the Giants no matter what.
Yeah.
I watched them when Odell was there. I watched them when Odell was gone. It didn't matter. I love the team just as much. So you make a really good point. But then the counter argument is, well, Antonio Brown is like the best wide receiver in the league. Someone is going to give him a chance. So unless you made a rule that is blanket across the league, which, hey, maybe when you are the the commish, we'll let you make that rule. But like, how could you, like, in that essay, I guess, or just in your own personal philosophy, how can you make sure something like that happens and these people that are just uber talented and are above the law don't really slip through?
Yeah, I mean, there's no way, obviously, to ensure that something like this never happens. I think what I wrote about, and I think what I believe is, it starts with the draft, the pre-draft process, really understanding the character of the people coming through, and not necessarily to say that people who have low character grades. So this has been a thing since like early mid 2000s. Rich McKay, I think, was one of the first people to do it with the Falcons, where he assigned a talent grade and a character grade. So it's not to say that if someone gets a low character grade, they're undraftable or they should drop way down from the first to the seventh, their first round talent. I think it's more about being cognizant of what players need and implementing those things in your organization. So implementing things like mental wellness programs. Like, very clearly Antonio Brown is suffering from some sort of mental issue, because he wasn't like this in the first few years of his career. Even if Mike Tomlin was able to suppress it for a long time, like, if you watch interviews of his, he's very clearly was a very likable, charismatic individual. So I think being able to implement wellness programs, understanding the psychology of players. So it's a lot of more we're not punishment oriented, but I'm
I got you.
losing the word, but yeah.
You're good. I understand. I can't find that word either. I know exactly what you're trying to say. And you make a great point. I mean, my girlfriend is a huge Dancing with the Stars fan. Antonio Brown was on Dancing with the Stars. She loved him. He was awesome. As you said, he's charismatic. His smile is incredible. Like, he sums off as such a nice guy. And all of a sudden he just, something snapped, man. And I don't know what it is. And, hopefully he can get well. It's a bad look, especially I think some more stuff came out today about now there's like a warrant out for his arrest or whatever. But it is what it is. And hey, what are we going to do? Hopefully he can get help. And you make a very good point. I mean, just having these things in place, obviously where the NFL was 5 years ago, where the NFL was 10 years ago, this is huge leaps and bounds. but I think it only makes sense. Player wellness is very important, physically, but mentally. I mean, if you're mentally not there, physically, you're not going to perform as well, right? So you need to be there. So I want to go from sports a little bit to what you're doing at Blitzalytics. I think I remember you explaining it to me once, and I'm not going to try and sell your product, so I'll let you go with it. But I remember
Sure.
that's really what caught my attention is when you told me, like, hey, I started this, and now me and a bunch of dudes, we write a lot about football and the analytics side and everything that's going on. So if you don't mind, I don't mean to steal your thunder, but tell me a little bit more about Blitzalytics.
Definitely. So in the fall of 2017, I was taking an online football analytics course from Sports Management Worldwide. It was my second course that I took with them. I had taken the football GM and scouting course a couple years prior. And in one of our group meetings with the teachers, Jack Bourgeois, who's our CEO, he messages me and he's like, hey, like George, someone else who helped found it. It's like he and I were thinking about having a place to showcase our work because we were doing a lot of work in this class. We all took the GM and scouting course. We did a lot of work, scouting reports for every position, biographies on general managers, like backgrounds on transactions. And there was a ton of stuff that we were putting out that we felt could be shown a lot more than just a line on our resume. And so Jack reached out to me, said like, we want to start a place for this to happen. I was all in, I loved the idea. And so me, him, and a few other people who were in that class, we started it. And the idea of Blitzalytics is basically to provide a platform for people who want to work in the football and sports industries to showcase their work. So everyone has a portfolio on the website. And if you go into a job interview, I've done this for job interviews that I've had. I say, hey, go on to blitzalytics.com/Alexander Amir, look at my profile, look at what I know. And that'll tell you what you need to know about me.
Yeah.
So it's basically just a sports resume for people looking to work in sports. Sports is such a prohibitively restrictive industry to get into that I feel like this provides a big competitive advantage to a lot of people. So in terms of what we do, we've, I think, pretty quickly grown into a pretty well-rounded football media outlet. We write, general articles on NFL news and analysis. We have professional style scouting reports that we've also tweaked a little bit to add our own metric to make it more accurate to how we feel the scouting process should be. We have a growing analytics department and various metrics to grade players by. And then we also have graphic designers. We have, I think, 6 or 7 podcasts. So it's really like an all-encompassing media thing for football.
That's incredible, man. And you guys you're like, hey, we're doing all the work. We might as well put it somewhere. And now look what you got.
Yeah, exactly.
Now you have like a media company essentially, which is absolutely fantastic. So I guess your work specifically, what do you do? What do you write about? What do you create content around?
Yeah. So for me personally, I kind of like do a little bit of everything in terms of content. I'll write articles. I guess I prefer to write about the Giants and the NFC East. That's where I like lean towards, but I'll write any kind of team articles if there are trades going on. We have weekly previews and recaps. In fantasy football season, I'm the director of fantasy football content. So I kind of oversee everything that goes out for that department. Now that scouting season's starting, I'm about to begin the scouting process of writing our scouting reports. I've already done some just short player backgrounds for the Senior Bowl, where we have a few people there as credentialed media members, actually. So if you check us out on Facebook and Twitter, we actually have interviews with Matt Patricia, Zach Taylor, Michael Pittman, Anthony Gordon, like a bunch of prospects. So I kind of have my finger in a little bit of everything, and then obviously helping just to manage some of the advertising and everything that goes into it.
That is awesome. I mean, you guys are, I mean, that just sounds like the coolest thing. So one, obviously working in sports, as you said, it's very difficult to get into because everybody wants to do it. But I also think the other side of that, B, is working in sports, it's just an industry. You can literally do anything and work in sports. You can do advertising. You can do, content creation. You can do finance. You can do so many different things and be in sports. That you have to do something like this. You have to set yourself apart. And by being the director of, a content director of a media company for multiple years, I think is a great way to do that. And I just think it is fantastic that you guys were smart enough to figure out, hey, this is something that we need to do. And then B, clearly you have absolutely run with it. So congratulations on that. Everyone will be able to check it out. Everything's in the show notes, of course. So I guess with what you do in the media and everything that you create, you did get a job with the NFL. Now I'm sure that had something to do with it, but what
Yeah, yeah.
is it? What is it specifically that you do in the NFL
Yeah,
for
so
the NFL?
right now my official job title is statistics and player participation quality assurance. So basically, my department validates every stat coming out of the NFL and making sure it's all correct on game day, then during the week for fantasy football purposes and for contract purposes. So very oftentimes we'll have communication from agents or players or teams saying, we think this guy should get credit for this sack, or we think it should be a split sack between these two guys. And we basically have to make sure every stat is correct. That's the primary bulk of our job. And then in addition to that, we do some stuff with inputting data for head impact exposure for the league's research on concussions. We also do some stuff with college football video and play-by-play and college football rosters, so that the teams use for their scouting process. So we're basically the technical support, I guess, for the NFL, for lack of a better term. But the statistical validation is the primary job function.
I mean, if there is a way to get into the NFL that sounds the coolest without having
Oh,
to be a water
it's an
boy, like
awesome
that
job.
has
Yeah.
got to be so cool, man. I mean, of all things, like you're just talking to agents, just making sure stats are correct. And I want to thank you because it might have been you. I'm in a fantasy football league. It's IDP, and I can't remember what week it was, but Kevin Byard was credited with the pass defense, and I got an extra point, and
There you
I
go.
went from losing by half a point to winning by half
That
a
was
point.
that was all
Um,
us.
that was 100%. I mean, I personally, I think it was you, Alexander. Like, I am confident that you were the person that said, you know what, I think this is going to change somebody's life today.
If you tell me the week, I can go back and check
Oh
and
my
let you know.
goodness. I don't want to do it live because it might take me a minute, but when we hop off, I will 100% do that, and
Definitely.
then I'll let everybody know if that's exactly what happened. So you primarily work in the statistical department, the statistical realm. Obviously, you write articles on the Giants and the NFC East, and your fantasy football focus. Which of this, if there's a avenue that you would prefer to go down, is there one that you like more than others, or are you just trying to take in all the information and pretty much push out as much content as possible at this point?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, the long-term goal to work in sports is to work in a front office management
Yeah.
capacity. Right now, it's really just taking everything in. I think that I'm still, you know, way behind where I think I would like to be in terms of scouting. So it's definitely something that I just want to learn more from. I think it's a years-long process to really feel comfortable scouting prospects, and it's really never done. I really enjoy. I was in like 8 fantasy football leagues this year. I love playing fantasy football.
How
That's
many
definitely
did you
something.
win?
I had a brutal
Oh,
semifinal year.
uh,
I was in 5 semifinals and lost all of them
oh my gosh.
and a few of them by like a point and a half or less.
Oh
It was a
goodness.
brutal year.
Well,
Um,
that sucks. Yeah, there's
yeah,
not
yeah,
much I can say to
it was
that. Yeah,
rough. I
that's
was a little upset.
unfortunate.
I was
Yeah.
a little upset. But yeah, it was still fun. I'll still play in 8 more leagues next year. So I really enjoy that. And then obviously just analyzing how NFL trades and free agency acquisitions go down. So really, I think, yeah, like you mentioned, just taking everything in right now and doing as much as I can to get into it.
And with splitting your time between the NFL, was Blitzalytics, did they pretty much say, hey, like we prefer if you continue, hey, we want to make sure like you can do this for us soon? Like how does that conversation work in understanding that your obvious goal is to work for the NFL? So whatever they kind of say is the letter of the law.
Yeah, so I mean, our whole mission at Blitzalytics is to get people employment in the sports industry, because not only like that's why we started to
Mm-hmm.
try and create a pipeline there, but also it benefits the individual who's writing for us, and also benefits us by having our
Yeah.
own individuals there, because then we can help push more talent into the
Mm-hmm.
industry. So I do think we really appreciate the fact that people are able to spend time in these jobs. Also, I appreciate the fact that Blitzalytics has been growing so rapidly that we've been getting a lot more writers and a lot more contributors. So, the burden on me and other core management
Mm-hmm.
members, the burden is not on us to produce a ton of content,
Mm-hmm.
because so many people are interested in doing it. But yeah, I mean, my co-management members and our CEO and everyone's super understanding and super flexible, and there's outstanding communication with what we do. So it kind of goes like month by month, like really communicating what everyone can contribute and what everyone's doing in their lives. But it's a great group of people to work with.
So with that, there's so many people that I know, particularly a good friend of mine who had an awesome blog, like just an awesome football blog, and it was great. And he did it by himself for fun in college, and he had like close to 1,000 people that would read his articles. Which, I mean, this was back in 2012,
Oh, yeah,
2013.
that's awesome. That's
Exactly, it was, and then he got lazy and stopped doing it. So it's very unfortunate, and he always complains all the time about how much he would love to just be a football writer. So joke's on him. But I'm sure you've seen that story once or twice. Like, how often do people come in gung ho, like, yeah, I can't wait, like, let's do it, and then they just kind of fall out? Like, what's the vetting process like on your end to make sure that you're not bringing someone in, teaching them everything, having to do everything, and then a month and a half later they don't answer your emails, and you're kind of just like, well, this was a waste of my time?
Yeah. So what we really try and do at Blitzalytics is make it what you put in is what you get out of it situation. Yep. So our vetting process is relatively simple. I mean, we look at like writing samples from people or analytics backgrounds or graphic design backgrounds, whatever their path is. We look at that. We evaluate the quality. Obviously, we talk to the person who wants to join. But from that point on, it's really to a large extent, you can do as much or as little as you want, but just understand that you're not going to get as much out of it if you don't do more, which is pretty simple. And so obviously there's some kind of minimum level of commitment. We try and ask everyone to contribute at least some certain amount per month, depending on what their department is. But it is very much individually motivated for people who join. And so we've had people that have joined, put out a couple pieces of content, and just realize it's either not for them or they just don't have time to do it, which is totally fine. Like you have to learn somehow. And so the idea is just create some way for people to build some kind of brand for themselves to show to employers.
Yeah, I mean, that's really again, in sports, everybody else is trying to do this, right? Like, right. Who doesn't want to, how many people do you know that don't want to work in sports in some capacity? I mean, I do, and that's why I do this, and that's why I started a company based around it, so it works. So I'm knock on wood for me, Alexander, but everything's going pretty well. Thank you. I appreciate it. But I mean, it's just, there's so many things that how many people at 8:30 at night would say, yeah, I would love to jump on a podcast for, 45 minutes to an hour and just talk to you when you could be watching Netflix, right? I'm sure there's something good on Netflix right now, and then after this, I'm going to go and edit a couple podcasts and I'm going to upload them. I'm probably not going to go to bed till 10:30, 11. And then, we wake up at 6 and we do it again tomorrow. 6:30. I'm not going to lie. Wake up at 6:30 and we do it again tomorrow. So it's one of those things where, we're young, we have some energy, and it's really something you want to do. You can't work 9 to 5, right? Like 9 to 5 is that's the first job. It's the second job after that. So with what you do at the NFL, like how it sounds like it's a lot of game day stuff. And then beginning of the week, like now that the season is really winding towards, there's literally one game left. What exactly are you doing at this point? Because there's only so many stats that need to be corrected at this point, right? Especially with both games being total just runs. They just ran the ball. What the 49ers have like 45 plays? Like there's only so many stats that need to be corrected.
Yeah, there were about 140 plays in the 49ers game. I will say the runs are a little harder just because if there's a clog in the middle, there's no idea who to give the tackle to.
That's true.
So it takes a lot of time to figure out. But the quick games are very nice. So throughout the season, we would always have people working on game days. I would work pretty much every game day auditing the stats. There are a couple other game day roles. But and then during the week, usually the process was Mondays and Tuesdays where we would go back, watch the games, make sure it's all validated. I'd probably do 5 to 6 games between every week, not counting the live days. And then after that, we would do the head impact exposures and college football stuff. So right now, we're catching up on the head impact stuff and the college football stuff. And it was a seasonal job, so the job actually ends February 14th.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Yeah, exactly. Happy Valentine's Day. Your seasonal
have
job
fun. See you later.
Over. Yeah. But yeah, I have a few things planned to do between now and the fall, or between after this job and the fall. But yeah, right now it's mostly the head impact stuff and the college football. We are doing the Pro Bowl though, and we did the East-West Shrine Bowl last week, so there are still a couple game days.
And then the Senior Bowl is Saturday.
Senior Bowl is this weekend, but we aren't responsible for the Senior Bowl stats.
Okay, you are not. But as you said, with Blitzalytics, you do have some credentialed.
Yeah, we do have credentialed members. We have a whole list of every Senior Bowl prospect. Yeah, so the NFL job is not involved in that.
Hmm.
Blitzalytics is
So then,
100%.
what exactly are you working on now? So that's what you're working on with the NFL. What exactly are you working on with Blitzalytics? Like, do you have any like features coming up? Are you doing a giant mock draft that you have to get out soon? Like, is there anything specific that you are working on and not kind of just overseeing?
Yeah, just scouting reports definitely is what
Okay.
I think pretty much most of us are going in on right now. We just finished putting together a background on the Senior Bowl prospects, so
Hmm.
those were like very very mini scouting reports. Now's the time to go in the full template, the full pro style template, and make those scouting reports. And then we'll have tons of mock drafts coming out from every writer. I'll write a couple. We also are actually a very cool thing that we're going to be coming out with. It's called the State of the Franchise. We're going to have a different person on a podcast. It will also be in written form each week or every couple weeks about what to do with a team, basically. So we're going to
Hmm.
look at the team's free agents, their draft picks, and we're basically going to make the decisions for them and say what the ideal situation for a team to do is. So we have a huge Dolphins fan with us. We'll be doing the Dolphins State of the Franchise, and we'll see if he wants Tua. We'll see if he wants to trade up for Burrow. We'll see
Oh.
if he doesn't want a quarterback altogether, wants to wait for Lawrence next year. So tune in
It's
to find out.
something, man. That is, I mean, and this is going to be a really. So my mom's a very big Dolphins fan. So
Yeah.
there's a soft spot in my heart for the Dolphins. A good buddy of mine is going to be in my wedding next year. I guess later this year. He's a Dolphins fan as well. So they've always had a soft spot in my heart, and I kind of want them to be good, but they just have been so bad. Like I couldn't
I mean,
even
it'd be
care
nice to
less. But
see a good
yeah,
Dolphins team.
right. Like I'm okay with the Patriots not making the good
Oh,
conference
I'm happy
finals.
with it.
Like it's been awesome. I got to enjoy it. But this is, going to be an incredible segue. Now I need to know. You're the Giants fan, man. Like, what are we going to do, dude? We got a new
Okay.
head coach. How do you feel about it? You got to tell me. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I mean, when the JoJo's hiring happened, I was totally neutral. I had no idea how to feel about it. After watching the press conference, I was like all in until I
Oh,
realized
okay.
until I realized
Oh,
that his press conference was exactly like Freddie Kitchens' press conference last year.
uh,
But I do think one, having a special teams coach is interesting and potentially a good thing because they have to make a lot of snap decisions in game and really control players coming on and off the field, which I think is an important thing for a head coach to know and just being comfortable in a time pressure scenario. Also, rumor is that Belichick was grooming Joe Judge for a head coaching job even more so than he was with Josh McDaniels. Like he really had him involved in the team management, what was going on. So I do think that's a great thing. The coaching staff that Judge has also built, I think, is very, very solid. As much crap as Jason Garrett
yeah.
gets,
Yep.
the Cowboys were a top 10 offense every year that he was
Hmm.
calling plays. So I'm plenty happy with him as the OC. Remind me who the defensive coordinator
Oh, the
is.
guy over from the Dolphins, Graham,
Yeah, yeah,
something.
yeah.
He was the
I don't remember his.
Dolphins
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
DC.
Oh,
They
yeah.
ran
And
it.
so
Yeah. So he was a Patriots
their
guy. I'm
defense
pretty
was.
sure.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of them have ties to
Yeah.
Joe Judge and the Patriots, but I mean, the Dolphins' defense was pretty good in the second half of the year. Like he did a lot with a little talent. So I do
Very.
like
Yeah.
that, and like coaches like Brett Bielema, and he just has a bunch of veteran coaches on the coaching staff that I think will help him transition to becoming a head coach. So I'm excited about that. In terms of the draft, I'm all in on Isaiah Simmons from
Oh.
Clemson
Okay. Yeah.
because I mean, obviously, we played our way out of getting Chase Young.
Yay.
Yeah,
Love it.
yeah, yeah. That was a sad weekend, even though we
Uh,
won.
yep.
But Isaiah
It
Simmons is
went to
just
overtime too. I was like, oh my god, I think they're gonna lose, and this is gonna work out. Like, nope,
yeah.
nope, it didn't.
That was
But
the same
whatever.
week. The same week, the Dolphins and Bengals also went to overtime.
Mm-hmm.
It was like just the top four picks, just going down the drain.
Oof. But anyway, I'm sorry. So Isaiah Simmons, really?
Yeah, I love him. I think he's an absolute freak. He's an alien. He can play any position on the field. And I think he's kind of where we're going to see NFL defenses trending towards because we've seen this year and a little bit last year, teams are the kind of the default or the base personnel is kind of like six defensive backs. And
Yeah.
like teams are playing with so many defensive backs and versatile players in the field. You see how someone like Derwin James made such an impact last year. He was hurt this year, unfortunately. But just the freaky athletic defenders that can move in space and play so many different positions, I think is just going to be crucial. So I'm really, really hoping the Giants can get a playmaker like him or him
Yeah. Yeah.
on
Right.
the defense this year. If not, if he somehow gets taken third, I mean Jeffrey Okuda would be awesome to have at four. He's an amazing
He's
quarterback.
insane, dude.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, I hate Ohio State, but I love watching him play. It is
yeah.
ridiculous. I mean, that game, the Clemson Ohio State game, both of them were great.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was so much fun to watch. So no, I totally agree, and you make a really good point. I mean, Bill Belichick, especially with his defense, it's always been, I don't want to say an amoeba, but it is always like
Positionless.
it's positionless, exactly. Like Trey Flowers, he was great in New England, and I'll be totally honest, I don't really know exactly what he did in Detroit last year,
Not
but
much.
it
I
wasn't
don't think.
surprising that Matt Patricia was like, oh yeah, you come over here now, and you can kind of, we could do a bunch of different things with this guy, which is really interesting. So no, I totally get that, and you're right. I mean, you're going up against an offense that's 9 times out of 10 three wide, and if they're not three wide, there's two wide receivers and then a tight end that can run up the
Yeah.
seam and is athletic as hell. So it's one of those things where getting to have all those defensive backs on the field, and the Giants haven't had a linebacker, I think, since I
Yeah.
can remember, if I'm not mistaken. Like
I think
maybe
it's
the
like
second
Carl
Super
Banks
Bowl.
or like LT was the
Oh yeah,
last
those guys. I
linebacker.
mean, but
Yeah, yeah.
like serviceable linebacker since like the second Super Bowl, I think. So it's
Yeah, because those
been.
are like the last guys they drafted in the
Oh
first
yeah,
round.
yeah. Oh
They
yeah.
haven't drafted a linebacker in years, and they
Yeah.
haven't had one in
Jerry
years.
Reese was against linebackers, man. He didn't like them. He didn't like them, but that was insane. I mean, I guess that's a really interesting question. Like um, when you look at front offices, do you kind of sit in it and kind of obviously say like, oh, I would have done that? I mean, I can armchair GM all day long,
Right.
but like, do you try and put arguments behind everything and like really try and see it from both sides, where everyone's coming from? The money was worth it, the player was worth it. Like, how do you kind of have those internal debates with yourself?
Yeah, I do try and understand the thought process, and like anyone can play armchair GM, and I think I have a pretty good understanding of the game. But like to a large extent, these guys are professionals for a reason, and they
Yeah.
are doing it for a reason. So, like I was against picking Daniel Jones at number 7, and I really like what I saw from him last year, and I do think Gettleman made a good pick with him there. And I even when the draft was happening, I get the logic of if he's your quarterback, you get him at all costs.
Yep.
By the same token, tons of reports were saying that the Jaguars were willing to trade down. So if the Giants played the draft right, they could have had Josh Allen at 6, traded up with the Jaguars from 17, and then take Daniel Jones at 7. The reason the Jaguars didn't want to trade down and when it happened is because Josh Allen was available. So
Hmm.
I do think the Giants have struggled like playing the draft, and so that's where my biggest critique comes in. Because I don't think I can evaluate talent as well as a lot of like professional scouts can. Uh, so I definitely do try and see it from their perspective,
Hmm.
but also put arguments behind everything that
Yeah.
I'm
It's
saying to
it's
do.
especially if that's what you're trying to do. You kind of, because so many people, in your and my opinion, I'm sure, always make the wrong decision, right?
Right.
Like it's always consistently wrong, but there has to be a reason why so many people are doing things this way. Now, is it just stuck in the mud? Is it just hog mollies, as Gettleman would like to say? It's just
Yeah.
old school pound him in the face football. And there's a lot of reasons and a lot of good and bad reasons, I guess, for that. But it's always interesting, especially if that's something. I'm not trying to work in a front office. That's not my
Yeah.
not my scope. That's not what I'm trying to do. But at the same time, it's got to be very interesting to try and play those cards. So I guess then, first off, thank you for getting on camera today, because that means when you're the Giants GM in like 40 years, you'll be way better at talking than Dave Gettleman, because that's the thing I think I
Well,
hate
thank
about
you. I
him the
appreciate
most.
that. Yeah.
I hate him when he's in front of the camera because he
Yeah.
always makes himself look like an idiot.
It's rough.
And that's,
The you heard the computer folk thing.
oh my God,
Yeah.
dude. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But that's enough. I don't need to talk too much more about him. I guess if you were the Giants GM, obviously Eli is gone, sad day. But obviously we have Daniel Jones, we have Saquon Barkley, we have somewhat of an offensive line that's not very good. Nate Solder has given up more sacks than Eric Flowers did. Let's all take that statistic in for a second. Like what, I guess, with all the money in free agency, and I read a few articles that there's a very easy way that we can find another 20 million by cutting a few players.
Mhm.
What would you do with $80 million in free agency today?
Yeah. So I think addressing the offensive line has to be like they've been saying it for years, but it hasn't been done.
Hmm.
Um, Nate Solder, I believe, has an out. The team has an opt-out clause in his contract, either this season or next season. If it's this season, you get rid of him immediately. Get a left tackle. If you can't draft a left tackle, which I hope they do, if you can't draft a left tackle, just get some other left tackle to fill in. That's better than Nate Solder and wasn't playing on the Patriots, because it seems like every Patriots player that has left the organization has not done well.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not too familiar with who's on the free agent market right
Hmm.
now. I couldn't really tell you specifics, but definitely invest in the tackle positions in the offensive line, just because you need Daniel Jones to
not fumble the
You need
ball.
to see him develop. But yeah, not fumble the ball, but also you need to see him develop and like just give him what you
Hmm.
can to see what he can be.
Absolutely.
Um, I think wide receiver is huge, preferably a speed guy. Again, I don't know who's available in free agency, but the Giants' separation was horrible last year that they got from their receivers. And, you know, I think part of the Daniel Jones struggles in terms of interceptions, just incompletions, was receivers just couldn't be open. And I think that says a lot about Daniel Jones that he was able to put up the numbers he did without receivers getting open, and it was extremely impressive. But I think investing just in offensive weapons for Daniel Jones to develop. The reason I don't say to invest much on defense is because the defense needs an entire overhaul, and I don't think you can do that without the draft. So I think right now Daniel Jones' development is the most important thing, and just finding pieces you can build around for the future. So it's not worth it to waste money on 2 or 3 year contracts for like mid-level defensive veterans who are not going to be on the team when you're ready to compete anyway. So I think develop Daniel Jones as much as possible. See who you can get in free agency. Maybe a splash free agency signing that's young that can be there for a while
Hmm.
because they have so much money. But the priorities are helping Daniel Jones develop and investing all your draft resources into the defense and offensive line.
So we're gonna be bad for like 2 or 3 more years.
I think so. I think the defense is really, really terrible, and
It
it'll
is.
take a couple of years for them to
It
be
is
better.
awful. I mean, like, who on the defense is worthy of keeping around? I mean, Jabril Peppers was way
He
better
was
than I thought
very
he
good.
was
He
going to
was
be.
same. Yeah.
Way better than I
Yeah.
thought he was going to be. But outside of him, man, I mean, Marcus
Dexter
Golden is
Lawrence is going to
gone.
be
Dexter
there.
Lawrence, he's been cool.
Yeah.
I
I really
guess.
couldn't tell you who else. Like I
Leonard
remember
Williams is probably going to walk, so that was just a waste of a
I
third
know
round pick. So,
third and
but
fourth. Yeah.
yeah, oh yeah. Well, yeah,
DeAndre Baker's going to be there, but who knows what he's going to be. Like he
yeah.
kind of looked a little bit like a bust last year. It's too early to label any prospect a bust after 1 year, but he did not look good last
He
year.
looked terrible.
Yeah.
I was so happy for that pick too. I was like, all right, cool. You got up in the 30, 31, so you got that 5th year option, so you
Yeah.
can have him around for a little bit longer. Nope, he looked awful right from the get go. And hey, it is what it is, man. Um, what is it like running a media company, especially one that kind of your words has blossomed this quickly, and now it's like, yeah, as you were saying, you're running the advertisements. I'm sure there's people reaching out to you for ad reads on podcasts and promoted articles. Like, what is that aspect of it like, rather than, when you originally got into it, you're like, yeah, we want to create content and put it out there so we can get jobs, and now you're strapped with running a media company. That's
Yeah.
kind of cool, but also there's a little back and forth to that.
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest challenge is just communicate. Like, as good as we communicate, we're all spread across the country. I mean, I should have explained this earlier, but none of us are really in the same city or really have much like face-to-face contact. We're all spread across the country. Our CEO just moved to Mississippi. I'm in New York. Another core member or 2 other core members are in Florida. So we're all spread around the country. And so a lot of the communication, all the communication happens over Slack and Google Hangouts. And so being able to just get things in motion, like get partnerships happening, getting ad deals happening. It just takes a lot of time, and like any promotional things, like we really have to be able to communicate very efficiently to get things happening. Um, I personally do a lot more of the content stuff rather than like business management.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I have input in that and input and say in what happens in the business. Um, but yeah, I would say the biggest challenge is definitely just the communication, getting the ball rolling, especially also because a lot of us don't have, actually, most of us don't have a significant background in business
Mm-hmm.
or law or anything. So we're kind of running on limited expertise. So a lot of the stuff that we do has to be vetted by other people, and it just all kind of takes time.
Mm-hmm. Hey man, learn on the fly.
Yeah, no, for sure.
That's the way business works. I mean, let's be honest. Like, business school was great, but I mean, I've met people with MBAs that aren't that much smarter than me. You know what I mean? Like, it's a cool 3 letters to have after your name, but I mean, in business, it really comes down to the. I don't want to say the more you fail, the better you'll end up
No,
being,
it's
but you
true.
really
It's true.
have to have those experiences and be like, all right, check. Mental note: never do that again.
Yeah.
Ever, never do that again. Okay, we'll move forward. So I think that's really cool, though. And I mean, again, you're learning on the fly. You're learning how to do these things. What types of partnerships and what types of companies do you guys look at and try and create these, opportunities, activations around and for?
Yeah.
If you can talk
So
about that.
yeah. So I'm not going to go into specifics, but something that we're trying to do right now is putting together profiles for players in like free agency. That's something we want to get into. We haven't gotten into it yet, and so we're in talks just to get that out there and kind of help players or prospects showcase their work in like a statistical format, so like
Hmm.
putting together information on a player or a prospect to try and make their case to a team to be signed to X amount of dollars in a contract.
Hmm.
So it's something we're working on. Um, ads really just looking at the like whatever market we think fits best
Okay.
for our
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
audience. And then in terms of our content, just I think it's more just doing research and seeing where our content fits into the grand scheme of sports media and sports companies, and just seeing where we can license out a lot of our stuff.
The best way to do it, man. Just
Yeah,
kind of, yeah, just keep learning on the fly, figure it out. Does this
yeah, for
work,
sure.
guys? Yeah, hey, these guys are happy. Okay, cool. Let's do more of that. That's awesome, man. I mean, I've asked you a lot about working in the NFL. I asked you a lot about your media company. You kind of gave us the vision of your career, which is going to be, either commissioner or GM of the Giants,
All right,
hopefully.
well, we'll see. Hopefully,
We'll see, man. But I guess from where you are now, like, what are the steps to get there? Because it's a long process, and I'm sure you
yeah.
haven't just been like, all right, pie in the sky GM. I'm sure you have this kind of planned out. As you said, you're going to law school, so that is obviously, a step on the way. But like, what do those steps look like to actually go from, quality assurance, statistical guy who saved Mike a point on his fantasy to being a GM? Like, what does that roadmap look
For
like?
sure. I mean, so for me, it started way earlier than this. So like
Oh, of course, of
in high,
course.
yeah, and I think just as early as you can get into it, like that's really what matters, because it'll all build on something else. In high school, I tried to just get involved in my high school sports teams. I like played soccer and basketball and got involved in a managerial capacity a little bit. I took the online football GM and scouting course in sports management worldwide. I figured, I needed some kind of sports on my resume to get started. That's really what matters the most. You need something to start off of, because you're not just going to get a job at the NFL or somewhere without having something. So I took those courses. I was extremely fortunate to be in that same course as our CEO, Jack, who had this idea from the start. And Blitzalytics was kind of like the springboard for all of that. In college, I had an internship at CBS Sports as a research intern. And 1000% the reason I got it is because I had Blitzalytics on my resume. And even if I wasn't like a core founding member, I think if I was part of Blitzalytics, that would have gotten me it just as well. So I don't think the managerial part is what got me. I think it's the fact that I was in it
Hmm.
and I had my work there to show. That was a huge part of it. And then obviously having a name like CBS Sports on the resume helps a lot to getting a job at the actual NFL. The fact that it was research, and
Hmm.
I kind of I figured what I can do now is tailoring my expertise to like the game of football or sports, like the game of the sports. If that makes sense.
Hmm.
So at CBS, like the research intern was like super in-depth statistics on players and storylines and all that. Blitzalytics, similar thing. NFL, all statistics. So, and then the reason I'm going to law school is because I think that introduces a whole different area of expertise that I can combine with my knowledge of the game to leverage me into a front office position. A lot of guys in the NFL, most notably like Rob Brzezinski and Howie Roseman, they have law degrees, and it's given them salary cap and contract knowledge expertise. And they use that, I mean, every day in
Yeah.
the team management skills. So I think between the negotiation, transactional skills that I'll learn in law school and my knowledge of the game that I've built up, and hopefully scouting over the next few years, that'll kind of all come together to what I want to do.
I love it, man. This is awesome. Alexander Amir, Blitzalytics, currently in the NFL. Happy Valentine's Day. You're going to lose your job, but I'm
Yeah,
sure
thank you.
pretty confident that you'll get it back.
Have a nice
Man,
Valentine to spend it with. So.
good for you, man. This was awesome, man. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.